Welcome to this episode of Outside Ourselves Summer Break. I'm your host, Kelsi Climbera. I'm taking a break this summer from full-length interviews for this mini-series entitled Summer Break, where in each episode, along with a guest, we take a look at a specific narrative. These have ended up being almost all TV and film related, a narrative which has theological implications that point us to the gospel. In this episode, I have a conversation with 1517 Executive Director Scott Keith about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU movies, and specifically the Infinity Saga series, which I think ended around 2019. We are taking a look at the connection between these movies and J.R.R. Tolkien's term Eucatastrophe, and very specifically, Scott leads us through a little bit about Tony Stark or Iron Man's character arc throughout this series. So with that, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Scott, thanks so much for joining me today on Outside Ourselves. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Don't get to see you quite as much as we used to.
I know. Well, for those who are listening who don't know who you are the executive director of 1517. You are an author and a speaker. Anything else that we should know about you?
I host the Thinking Fellows podcast, and I'd say I'm on the Tough Text podcast, even though it was my idea, but I'd have to say Dan hosts that one. I just do color commentary.
Love it.
On it. So, yeah. Other than that, no. The rest is just all personal stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm excited for this conversation. I feel like we've had a few conversations about the Marvel movies in general. And so that's why you're here today, to talk about some of your favorite story arcs in that series. And specifically, I would say, you can correct me, but within the Infinity Saga, is it Infinity Saga? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those movies, which finished. When did Endgame come
I
out?
don't know the date. I feel like it was probably 2017, maybe.
Yeah, I think it might have been 2019.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, whatever.
It's hard for me because I know where I saw it, and I know and I always connect that to when I lived in San Juan Capistrano, but I actually think we might have come down the mountain and just onto the same theater. And so that always messes with the dates in my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, tell us a little bit about why you like these movies, specifically the Infinity Saga series. What kind of drew you to them in the first place? And I'm curious too, are you a Marvel comic fan as well? I don't know this. Or did you just get into the movies?
So I just like movies in general. Like I'm a movie guy. It's been kind of hard lately because it seemed, in the past, especially in the summer, I used to be able to go see like a good movie every couple weeks or something like that. And movies are so on the decline now that kind of struggle to see even in the summer a movie like every 6 weeks or every 2 months that's any good or that you want to see or anything like that. And so this whole thing, the Marvel, the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, was all sort of, in my mind, like kind of the heyday of a good movie you wanted to see coming out every year or so for more than a decade, and just kind of got wrapped up into it from that. I wrote in my book Being Dad that one of the sort of hallmarks of sort of traditions for me raising my kids was always taking my kids to these midnight showings of big action-ish type movies that came out, and everybody did it, right? Star Wars did it, Marvel ended up doing it, the Batman movies did it, whole 9 yards. And so we did that the entire time my kids were growing up. That extended into them being teenagers and still doing it with the MCU, and then them being adults and still doing it with the MCU. By the time by the time we were seeing the last of the Marvel movies, Joy was staying home and watching grandkids so that the rest of us could go and see the movie, right? So it's kind of gone from the time Caleb was, I think, 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and we're going to see Phantom Menace at midnight, up to the last big one that we did together was probably Top Gun Maverick, and by that time Joy's watching five
A
grandkids
million, a million grandkids.
for all
Poor
going
Joy.
to the movie.
Very sacrificial of her, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about, I'm sure,
Uh,
today.
um, I was never really a comic book kid, um,
Yeah.
and that probably has to do with I was just not a reader as a kid either.
Mm,
I just wasn't. I watched a lot of TV growing up, and as part of watching a lot of TV, and I think that's a pretty common thing for an Xer to say. Like, I think you talk
yeah.
to an Xer, you're like, "Hey, did you watch a little TV or a lot of TV?" Did I watch TV?
All
Um,
the TV.
yeah, I watched all of the TV. Talk to me about any TV show from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I probably know it. So for me, a lot of this was cartoons. Just
Mm,
the various Spider-Man cartoons that were on when I was a kid, and there were several versions of it. Um, there was even an Avengers cartoon that the kind of the ones that Disney's putting back on with the X-Men now, X-Men 97, I think,
yeah.
like that I used to watch, and I remember watching those with Autumn when she was like 2 years old and
Mm,
stuff like that. Even so, that's kind of where I knew Marvel. So as a result, I never really knew when the movies were doing something like doing the same storyline, like the Infinity Stone saga, right? Doing the
right.
same storyline that a comic book did, and how different it was. I was never really privy to that. I basically knew it if it was in a cartoon and it was different. I probably knew it.
Yeah.
But if it was different in the comics, you could have fooled. It's like seeing a movie based on a book and not reading the book and being like, yeah, I really don't know the difference. I just like the movie. So same kind of thing there. But I did get into this, and one of the reasons I did get into it was just because it felt like to me, I I do write, right? I've written books and stuff like that. I always wish I could write a story. Like
Mm.
I can write stuff. Like you can ask me about a topic and be like, here's the topic. Blah, blah, blah. But somebody's like, hey, create a story for me, and I'm always like, uh, well, it's going to come out like a history exam. The date of this, it's not going to come out like a good narrative story. And so I'm always just transfixed by people that can write
Mm,
engaging stories.
yeah.
I'm just, Adam makes fun of me all the time because I read tons of novels, because I, I didn't get this as a kid. Obviously, I didn't read much, and so I get it now, and I'm amazed by people that can create worlds and even cities and in stories.
Hmm.
And so when when the MCU came along, it started out with Iron Man, and then Iron Man 2, I think, and then Captain America, and then it became clear that they were doing something bigger.
Right.
You didn't know that necessarily
Right.
at the
At the
beginning.
beginning.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But by the time you'd seen the Iron Mans and Captain America and Thor, you're like, oh, something's happening here. And what
Hmm.
became obvious was happening through the after scenes and everything was that they were putting together the Avengers.
Hmm.
And the fact that they could kind of create a multi movie universe in a sense and goal that was leading up to a single event sometime in the
Hmm.
future that you didn't know, and that they could involve various writers with this and various directors, and I now have learned the term showrunners on this, and I was just transfixed by it.
Mm.
I didn't like all the movies in between as much as
Right.
others, but I was just still absorbed with their ability to do this, and probably because I just don't have the ability to do it, but I appreciate it
Yeah.
when somebody else does, and I loved it. I even when I didn't like the movie necessarily, I loved its contribution to what was going to become the greater story, and I loved that I didn't know the outcome of the story too.
Mm.
I didn't
Mm.
know what was going to happen at the end. I didn't really know, what Infinity Stones were, or why they were important, or what it meant for the world, and which is why it was so disappointing in Loki when they made him unimportant. And I was like, okay, this is all over. So, but yeah, so
Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't read comics growing up, and I kind of had probably seen some of these movies early on here and there. So I mean, if people are really into the MCU, they knew early on that they were connecting them all. I don't know, but I think when I realized that they were all connected, I went back and rewatched everything, which was like pretty far along. I didn't because I just wasn't that into it for a while, and there is something so there's something so intriguing, I think, to figuring out how everything's connected. Like I feel like people do this nowadays with really good TV shows, like trying to
yeah.
figure out, we want to know, we kind of want to spoil the surprise for ourselves. I don't know what that is, but we want to be the one that can say, oh yeah, I knew how this was going to end, or I think it's going to end this way or this way, and test and see if we're right or not. There's something very human to that. um, what do you think about superhero stories in general? Why is the superhero story or narrative so compelling for people?
Well, I want to say that I would have never seen this. I don't think. I don't think I'm smart enough to be the one that would like pick up on this. But after reading, Tolkien's argument on sort of the Eucatastrophe and the existence of the archetype within myth in his little essay, which was a lecture called on fairy stories. And there's other people that have done it since,
Hmm.
to and sort of refined it since to this idea of the hero's journey. I'm pretty convinced that the reason I like stories and the reason everybody likes stories, or most people like stories, not Adam Francisco, but everybody else likes stories, is just because it they tap into something that Jordan Peterson would say that we want to be true,
Mm.
and Christians would say that we know was true
Yeah,
in Christ. And so we see it, and there's something in our soul that it hits with, and there's a resonance there that we're like, I've heard this before somewhere. And and then you read a story you created in your imagination, you see it on a screen, and it's like played out for you, and lights and pictures and sound, and it draws you in because you want it to be true,
yeah,
and at the end of the day, if you're a Christian, you can see that it is true, and that it's true
yeah,
for you in Christ, that there was this hero, and he did break in from the outside, and he did slay the dragon, and he did pay the price for that, and he did rose again, and he's gone home, and he's going to take you with him.
mm,
And there's all, you know that's that sort of divine archetype that I think all these stories are mimicking to some degree, not perfectly. We have to be careful with that kind of thing. We get into analogous type language, and we want it to be, um, you know, we want it to be exactly the same. We want it
yeah,
to, just come right in and be like, well, and then when it's not, we say, well, that's not like Jesus. Look at this.
mm,
Yeah, I get it. It's an it's an analogous argument. It can be like it without being exactly it. And so I see that in a lot of these. And then you can sort of see even ones that aren't directly like Christ, because the heroes are often flawed. Um, and we bustle, or we bristle at the idea that we would describe Christ as flawed. But when you kind of take on the concept that Christ was taking the sins of the world onto himself, and he was becoming the flawed for us, you know,
mm,
you can play with that, and writers can play with that a little bit more, and you can still sort of see the connection there.
yeah. So would you say the thing um, that Christians know is true and that the world really wants to be true, that thing in stories that we kind of connect with, especially the hero's journey type stories, is salvation? Is that the thing?
Yeah. So
Salvation or redemption?
as it's sort of described by so the hero's journey specifically, I think the guy's name is Campbell.
Yeah,
Um,
Joseph Campbell.
yeah, but when Tolkien's talking about, he doesn't use that. He uses sort of archetype and eucatastrophe. And so what Tolkien is talking about is that all of these stories share commonalities, and the commonality usually has to do with like there's some affliction that is on the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Christians hear that and they can obviously, say, "Oh yeah, the world is sinful and we're sinful," right? So that
Yeah.
some afflictions on the world. In a story, this is usually presented by like um, a witch or a dragon or something that comes in from the outside
Yeah.
and puts a curse on the world. Maybe a curse on sort of even like the best person in this world, sort of thing,
Mm.
White or something like that. And by putting a curse on the best person in this world or the world itself, that even, I mean, the Snow White thing even kind of fits with Adam and Eve being tempted and the curse
Mm.
falling down, and then the curse goes to the world too. So that's all sort of, we can recognize all those things. And the world is then encased in this curse, which is usually like visually represented or literarily represented by like thorns and thistles growing up, and the world is light and then becomes dark. You can see this in Tolkien. The closer they get to Mount Doom, sort of the darker both the
Yeah.
literary descriptions and the set pieces become, um, and it's just misery, and what it ends up taking is some hero from the outside of the curse coming into the curse, and in a sense becoming the curse by um, tearing back the thorns and the thistles, slaying the dragon, killing the witch, and usually paying a price for it in the
Right.
middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if that price, like in Endgame, is death
Yeah.
for the hero. Um, and then everything is broken away, and the curse falls. Everything peels back, the light comes back in, and Tolkien would say that within those stories, there's always an ultimate moment where you think everything is hopeless. Endgame's great for this, by the way. Everything is hopeless. They thought they killed Thanos. Thanos comes back from the future somehow, anyway, and right when they thought they had figured it all out and they were going to bring everybody back, he blows up the compound, and all of his army is standing out in front of there, and the initial Avengers try to fight him and they get defeated, but then all of a sudden, because everybody did come back, all of a sudden it seems like a fairer fight, but yet they're still
Mm.
and they're still losing, right? Thanos is still going to win, and it takes Tony Stark's sacrifice of his life to
Yeah.
actually defeat the ultimate enemy, and he does. And then in the movie, it's great because it's all green screen, but the set changes.
Right.
Darkness becomes light again, and you really see this pictured. And Tolkien would call that the point of eucatastrophe, the point at which you think the hero is going to die and everything's
Mm.
going to be lost. And it's right at that point that the story turns. And it just comes from the Greek word eu, which is good, and the English word catastrophe being brought together, and he calls it a good catastrophe.
Mm.
So
Which he's obviously comparing or using the cross, right, as the central narrative that all these other narratives kind of follow.
yeah,
Can you
Jesus is
talk a
put
little bit
in the
about,
tomb, right?
yeah.
Darkness falls over the land. There's an
Hmm.
earthquake. Everything seems lost. The disciples are
Disciples run
hopeless.
away. Yep.
Run away. They're hopeless. Peter's denying. It's just all seems horrible. They literally are going to the tomb, and their heads are hanging low. The ladies' heads are hanging low, and they're going to go prepare the body for. They did prepare it quickly because it was Sabbath. They're going to go prepare the body for its ultimate rest in the tomb, and they go there, and he's alive, right? And you have Easter, and Easter is the ultimate eucatastrophe that Tolkien is referring to, and he says that all other eucatastrophes either were precursors of this or remind us of this.
I had Ken Sundant Jones on recently to talk about Wicked, and he made this comment that the hero's journey is actually very anti-Christian. And
That's
I
funny.
think I know. I think what he was saying in that um, is that when we apply the hero's journey as like our own story. When we assume we are Tony Stark or we are Steve Rogers or um, whoever the hero is, then that is a very anti-Christian view of the world, because then we're assuming basically that we're Christ or we can become Christ. So I like this distinction that you're making, I think, between Eucatastrophe and Tolkien's kind of idea of this and probably what is more traditionally thought of as Campbell's development of
Right.
the hero story. Do do you think that that's true? What do you kind of say to that argument that the hero's journey is not Christian? Um, can you talk maybe
Sure.
a little bit more about the similarities and differences there?
So I don't think Campbell's sort of steps all apply to Christ.
Right.
Again, this is an analogy argument, and so
Yeah.
it's not going to be one to one. Even what Tolkien's doing with literature, it's not even simile, right? And he says that
Mm,
in it. He hates that kind of thing. He's saying this is literature, and you can see allusions in there, but you don't have to start drawing one to ones.
yeah. Okay.
He and Lewis had a famous argument over this. I don't I don't think the hero's journey is anti-Christian. There are obviously parts of the hero's journey that don't apply to Christ at all. Christ never really says, "Hey, I don't want to do this." When he does in the garden, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Um, he never really has a mentor unless you're sort of calling his mentor God the Father or the Holy Spirit or something like that. I don't know, but I think there are lots of parts of it that do apply
Yeah.
to Christ. He's incarnate, right? He starts in sort of this world that we can all recognize. He he starts his ministry, which is sort of like when he's 30 years old. So there's a long period of time when he's not seen as this person, and then all of a sudden is this person. He is, he's not seen as the Messiah, and then he starts walking around 30 years into his life and says, "I am." He obviously faces ordeals. He's always sort of got these tests with his disciples that seem like even his allies are challenging him and time again. Think of Peter. Even when Peter gets it right, the next breath he gets it wrong, and Jesus has to rebuke him and things like that. Um, he faces a horrible crisis that it seems like he loses. At the end, he's victorious. He goes away,
Hmm.
right? And he promises to come back. I mean, there's a lot of pieces here that are similar,
Yeah.
and
For
they
sure.
don't have to fit perfectly. Applying any of this to yourself is like trying to make yourself the subject rather than an object of the parable. It's just
Right.
it's just a
Yeah.
sin move that we make. It's
Right.
like we want to see ourselves in every parable, and we want to see ourselves as the Christ in every parable instead of letting Christ be Christ in the parable. And the same thing
Yes.
is said here. Sure, so
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think that was really his point. When we apply the hero's journey to how we think about personal transformation or even sanctification as Christians, I think that it can become maybe a little bit dangerous. Like, oh, we're going to overcome all these obstacles and then come out on the other side
Yeah.
perfectly sinless or whatever. So
I'm
in
gonna
this
watch
life.
that show
So,
that you did with him because I thought Wicked was horrible.
oh, you should. Yeah, it was really interesting conversation.
I thought it was a horrible disruption of like a classic fairy tale.
Oh, you got to Okay. You watch it and let me know what you think, or we
Okay.
can maybe can both come on and talk about it. But
Yeah.
let's talk really briefly now about just a little bit more about Tony Stark and his kind of arc in general. What draws you to this character, and maybe just kind of summarize for people who aren't super familiar um, his narrative, his storyline
Sure.
throughout over 23 movies. You have
Well, yeah.
5 minutes. Go.
Tony Stark's actually probably the easiest one in a lot of ways to describe
Yeah.
because he's an eccentric, narcissistic billionaire genius. I mean, that's kind of how he describes himself in the first Avengers when Captain America asks him, "Who are you?" He's like, "I don't know, narcissistic billionaire genius." He's like, and
Yeah.
that's what he is at the end of the day. Who he has this horrible thing happen to him where he's captured by what, let's be real, is the Taliban, and he's locked in a cave in, let's be real, is Afghanistan, and he is he's they had set off an IED, and shrapnel gets into his heart. Um, and in the cave, he's given a mentor. His name is Yusuf, and this mentor is a surgeon and is able to somehow embed. This is the part. This is where you have to suspend belief quite a bit.
Yeah.
Embed like this steel cylinder into Tony Stark's chest that has an electromagnetic magnet attached that keeps somehow the shrapnel out of his heart. Okay. So this is where you're like, wow, that's crazy. That would never happen. What a odd solution to this problem. But
Just go with
and
it.
so, yeah, Tony wakes up in this cave and he's like, I don't want to be walking around with a car battery, the rest of my life. So in the cave, he invents this piece of technology which is critical to the rest of Tony Stark's story, which is basically a power source. It's called an arc reactor, a power source that's very, very small, but that is kind of infinitely powerful, right? It can not only just keep the shrapnel out of his heart, but it can power machinery that he would attach to his body in magnificent ways. And so he does this. He puts it in his heart, keeps the shrapnel out, and then in the cave he builds, the original sort of really rudimentary Iron Man suit, which is a sort of an exoskeleton that he can put on that makes him stronger. Eventually, it makes it so that he can fly, can shoot laser beams, and all this gnarly stuff. Which then, by the end of that story, by the end of that first movie, makes him a superhero. Right? He
Right.
refines it. He refines the flying capabilities, the defensive capabilities, and the offensive capabilities of it. And by the end of that, he becomes a superhero. But the trick to Tony Stark is that, superhero or not, he's still a narcissist.
Yeah.
And this narcissism throughout the movies, I mean, for years and years and years, kind of ebbs and flows in Tony. And more than being like originally a Christ story, again, unless you actually believe that Christ took on the sins of the world fully, beyond being a Christ story, it's a story like of a saint sinner, that I think is really an interesting sort of, because it really does ebb and flow. Like you can look at Tony and you never know which Tony you're going to get. Are you going to get the one that's trying to do something good, or one that's doing something good that's mixed with a lot of selfish motivations? And it's, that culminates sort of that tension culminates in the Civil War movie. Is awesome. Like, it's actually probably my favorite of all the Marvel movies, where he's sort of having this battle with somebody who's a natural good person in Captain America, who's just always does the right thing, and Tony, who's trying to justify his feelings of guilt and all this other stuff. And it's really good. His story ends, it starts to end in the Infinity War movie, where he's out of it, right? Or the beginning of Endgame, but by the end of Infinity War, he's fought this fight with the ultimate evil. They've lost.
Yeah.
They lost the fight. So if you want to know sort of like what's the beginning of the Eucatastrophe and the Marvel arc, it's the end of Infinity War, when they've lost the fight, basically with the devil, right? Who's trying to destroy half of every living thing in the universe, not just on the Earth, but in the universe. And they've lost, and half of every living thing is gone, and they're living in sort of like this post destruction world.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do. And Tony blames Captain America, because, right, you don't know which Tony you're going to get ever. And he blames Captain America, and then he just like pieces out. Like, he's done. It's like, I'm done. And you get 5 years, eventually you get I think it's 5 years later. And there's a ray of hope, right? The ray of hope is that maybe they can go back in time and do this weird fix.
Do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they do that, but Tony doesn't want to participate in it.
And he doesn't want to participate at this point. This is also kind of an interesting sinner saint moment. He doesn't want to participate for some very noble reasons, because he has a family at this point, right? Like that's
Yep. Yeah, the cynical people would say that he doesn't want to participate because he lost the least, too. Like his wife Pepper is still alive. They've been able, their life quality hasn't changed much. They live on a beautiful lake. He's been able to get all this stress out of his life, which has been in his life for a decade.
Yeah.
He has a kid. He doesn't want to lose this now a better life, honestly, better life that he has now
Right.
post the snap than he did before it. There's no big bad to fight anymore. They fought him and they lost, and Tony came out okay.
Hmm.
Who we did lose was Peter Parker in Spider-Man. And eventually, what gets him to come back and help is the fact that he remembers. He actually has to see a picture of Peter and remember that he lost pretty big when he
Hmm.
lost Peter Parker. And again, Tony's always doing this. But at the end of the day, they have that big battle that we've already described. And what ends up happening is Doctor Strange has told him that in all of the 60 million permutations of this moment, there's only one way that they can win, and he never tells Tony what that way is. But you get the sense that Tony's known all along
Yeah.
that the only way they can win is that if Tony gives up his life,
Yeah.
and that's how they finally defeat Thanos, who's essentially the devil, and it's pretty amazing. Like, it's that whole scene, that whole last 40 minutes of that movie is just like, if you haven't seen it, I don't know, man. I
Go watch it right now after
actually get
this.
goosebumps. I really do. Captain America picks up that Thor hammer, and I'm like, holy cow, that's amazing.
I want to dig in a little bit more to this. Um, and this might just be, we've already covered this at this point, perhaps, but why, like, what about that makes us emotional or makes us, um, gives us goosebumps? The fact that not only that evil is overcome, but that sacrifice for the sake of other people is happening.
So I'm not gonna, for those people that are gonna get really one-to-one-y about this, take it out of your head for a second, right? But again, think in terms of analogy only. Christ is in the garden at Gethsemane. He's alone, right? He actually asks not to be alone.
Hmm.
And people that he's trained with him to make it so that he's not alone, for 3 years he's trained them, he's alone. He comes back, he's like, can't you just stay awake and pray with me just for a little bit? They're like, yeah, bro, we got you. 5 minutes later, snoozing, right?
Yeah.
um and this happens time and again, and Christ is in this moment. He's praying that God gives him another path,
Mm.
right? Take this cup from me. If there's any way, take it from me. And it's not that I don't think it's that he's afraid of dying. I don't think it's afraid of the torture that he's going to endure, and he endures horrible torture. I think he knows it's what's coming for him is the ultimate price that has to be paid to redeem us, which is he's got to have this point of time of separation from the Father.
Yeah.
And he's where he will be completely alone,
Mm.
right? And uh, it weighs on him so heavily. We're told that he sweats blood, right? And we kind of pass over these moments on Maundy Thursday, just like we've heard it a million times. But it's deep and grueling, and it's very. You want to call it a decision that he's making? It's a very difficult one to continue to be obedient to the Father and to the plan that's
Yeah.
been predestined for him in this. And I'm not saying you see that in this moment where Captain America and the Hulk and Scarlett Johansson's character, Black Widow, come and Ant-Man come and ask him to be part of the team, and he says no. Right? It's kind of a reversal of that in a
Mm.
sense. Um, but you see it when he's doing the dishes, and there's a picture of Peter Parker,
Mm.
and he literally loses control of his hands, and water goes spraying everywhere.
Mm.
And he almost falls over when he looks at the picture, and he's devastated.
Yeah.
He's devastated because he now knows. He's not devastated because he misses Peter. He does. He's devastated because he now knows what he has to do,
Hmm.
and he knows what the end result's going to be.
Yeah.
And so it's not the same thing. but it's the same sort of emotion, right?
Yeah.
When you actually listen to what's being said to you on Monday, Thursday, there is an emotion attached to that because you know what Christ paid for you.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to get that. It's not going to be as meaningful in a Marvel movie. Give me a break. But you you see a picture of something similar to it playing out,
Hmm.
you know, and you see it. It's there. You hear the words, and the music being played in the background. This is why we do plays and dramas and novels, and because they have a tendency to make something that is real, through something that's not real. They have a tendency to make something that is real mean more to us.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of what happens in not just in these movies, I think in these movies, but
Hmm.
in every good movie,
Yeah.
that's what happens. That's what makes a good movie a good movie. And by the way, it's why Marvel movies aren't good anymore. Just
Mm. Because they're
um,
not doing that.
no, that's gone.
What are
It's
they
been
do?
gone.
I
It's
don't want
been
to
gone.
get too far into this, but what are they doing? Like
I'd say
or what's missing? Maybe that's a better question. What's missing?
I'd say they've done more of what the world has done since 2016 ish,
Hmm.
which is just make everything a political commentary that's
Yeah.
agendized in a binary fashion.
Yeah.
Whichever binary fashion you're into, like
Right.
just know that you're being depraved of more color in your life than it used to have, and more vibrance than it used to have, by everything, right or left, being presented to you only in terms of our modern political context,
Mm.
um, and then hyper agendized
Yeah.
in that.
Well, and there isn't that breaking into, in my opinion, there isn't that breaking into me personally to say like to kind of point you to something that's ultimately true. There's just like preaching, not the good type of preaching, like the bad type of preaching at you about how bad so and so is. There's analogy towards these people out there, and kind of this assertion for you as a viewer to figure out which side you're on. But there's no personal relief, to use
No,
Dave Zoll's word. There's no personal
yeah,
connection to this moment of goodness is for you. I think that that's
right, yeah, yeah.
really
I think that's
interesting.
exactly right. And you get characters too who not only aren't flawed like Tony Stark, but they don't really go through anything. You
Yeah.
know, they don't
There's no
really.
sacrifice.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
Monday Thursday for them.
Yeah.
You know, and Monday Thursday is critical to the story of Christ. You know, uh, passion, death, and resurrection.
Mm,
And without that, there's no death there either. There's no Good Friday for them either. Usually, it's just sort of this ongoing battle that they're going to win. Um, and the battle never costs that much,
yeah.
um, and it's just not as compelling. It's just
Mm,
not as compelling. So I mean, we're not talking about this, but I was really conflicted with the last James Bond movie because he actually dies,
did
and
not know that.
that just doesn't happen in James Bond movies. I hated it, but
Mm,
I've been rolling around in my head a little bit more, um, and he has a very sacrificial death in that last movie, and it's kind of cool when I think about it that way. I just didn't want the character to be gone. I was
yeah.
being selfish.
Are they done with those? Are they going to like resurrect him?
I don't know. There's a Caleb and I have this big. I can come on and talk about James Bond. Caleb and I have this big thing over it because from Doctor No all the way to the last Pierce Brosnan movie, the suspense you disbelief and the disbelief that you apply to James Bond is the reality that it's the same person.
Right. Yeah. True.
Um, which could not be.
Right.
So
Impossible.
it's impossible. It's the same person, but you just heard that's the thing you give it. It's like Tony Stark's thing in his chest.
Right.
It's the thing you give it. This changes with Daniel Craig, and I don't think most of us who are James Bond fans understood how much it changed with Daniel Craig.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
it's essentially Daniel Craig is sort of like an alternate universe to the previous James Bond movies. type thing.
Okay. Those are
You
probably
like
the
to
only
do
ones
stuff.
I've really seen. I mean, I've like half
Yeah,
watched older ones, but
yeah,
so that I wouldn't know that.
yeah.
That's
Let me know
interesting.
when you. I'm on a deep James Bond
We should have done
dive
James Bond. No,
right
this
now.
was this was great.
People are
That's
like,
good to know.
I studied theology. I'm like, only through James Bond novels.
Write a whole book on it. That'll
I
be
should.
super fascinating. Um, Thank you, Scott. This has been great. And we didn't even get to Captain America, which is another amazing story arc, but we'll have to
Yeah,
save him
he's just
and
good.
James Bond for later.
Yeah, he's just good.
He's just good all the time. Outside Ourselves is a 1517 podcast and show. To learn more about all of our podcasts and all of our shows, please go to 1517.org/podcast. If you like this episode and you haven't done so already, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. That's where a lot of people listen, and it's super helpful if you can just go in, look up Outside Ourselves, even if you don't listen to the show there, and hit 5 stars. I think it will take you less than 10 seconds. Thanks as always for listening. I'll be back here in a couple of weeks with our next guest.